Have you ever paused to consider how much of your distress stems from your obsession with control? No, I'm not only talking about external control, work, bills, routine, but internal control, the suffocating desire for certainties, the need to know what will happen tomorrow, to fully understand who you are, what you want, and where you're headed. Society has taught you to chase definitive answers, as if life were a precise equation. But the truth that few dare to confront, is that this obsession with certainty actually distances you from what you want most. Peace. Perhaps you're tired, drained from trying to predict the unpredictable, from crafting perfect plans that fall apart with the smallest change of chance. Maybe you're stuck in the limbo of anxiety where every uncertainty becomes a threat, where the unknown feels like an enemy to conquer. But what if the issue isn't the uncertainty? What if the true problem is your refusal to accept it? Michel de Montaigne, a 16th century French philosopher, understood this before anyone else. While the world around him pursued dogmas, absolute truths, and closed systems, he did something uncommon. He looked inward. He examined his own mind, his fears, his inconsistencies, and dared to write about it all with brutal honesty, not as someone with answers, but as someone who learned to live better with the questions. And that's what you need now, not more certainties, but a new relationship with what can't be controlled. In this video, I want to propose a different path, a lighter and braver way to face life. I want to show you through Montaigne's wisdom that when you stop resisting the unknown, something changes. Anxiety loses its grip, pressures decrease, and for the first time in a long time, life begins to feel simpler. But beware, this simplicity doesn't come from the outside. It's not a change in the world, but an internal revolution. Starts now when you choose to let go, abandon the illusion of control, and walk with me not towards answers but towards a new way of being in the world. Are you ready? Because this journey, unlike anything you've been taught, begins with a single phrase, I don't know, and that's okay. Montaigne was not an ordinary philosopher. He did not ascend to pulpits, create complex systems, or try to force the world into rational formulas. He wrote from within his own skin, sitting in his library, surrounded by books and silence. Michel de Montaigne chose to explore the most unstable and mysterious object, himself. His texts are not treatises, they are mirrors. He didn't write to persuade you, but to invite you to think, to doubt, to question, to look within yourself without fear, or rather, despite the fear. Unlike other thinkers who sought universal truths, Montaigne embraced the opposite. He didn't know. And the more he lived, the more he realized that knowing little about the world, and even less about himself, wasn't a flaw, it was a rare wisdom. He constantly asked, what do I know? Not as a challenge, but as a starting point. Because admitting ignorance, for him, wasn't an intellectual failure, it was a liberation. It was stopping the pretense, ceasing to maintain masks, and lifting the burden of having to be someone, right, complete, impenetrable. The modern world rejects this humility. We live in a time when you must have an opinion on everything, a stance on everything, certainties as sharp as blades. But Montaigne gives us the opposite, a chance to be human. Before being ideological, he believed that our fragility, our doubts, and our contradictions are not flaws, to be fixed but essential parts of what makes us truly alive. And perhaps that's exactly what you need to hear now, that you no longer need to hold on to false certainties to be worthy, that you don't need to know everything to move forward, that it's okay to be incomplete. Montaigne allowed himself to change his mind. He contradicted himself. He admitted that what he thought yesterday might not be true today. He understood the natural movement of the human mind, which molds, adapts, and transforms. And instead of fighting it, he embraced it with kindness, with irony, with astonishment. He knew that living wasn't about controlling the world with fixed ideas, but about navigating it with an open mind and an attentive heart. That's why Montaigne is so necessary today. In a time when everyone shouts, he whispers. In a time of hard certainties, he teaches the lightness of doubt. And if you're feeling lost, overwhelmed by the pressure to be someone stable, defined, unchanging, perhaps what you lack is not direction, but freedom. The freedom to change, to not know, to simply be. But Montaigne doesn't just invite us to doubt. He warns us about the price of running from it, because the more we try to control life, the more suffering we cause. And that's what we're going to talk about now, the silent suffering that arises from desperately trying to control the uncontrollable. If this content resonates with you, click the subscribe button and join the channel. Thank you for your support. You try to control everything, don't you? Tomorrow, other people's reactions, your career, your body, your feelings, even things that aren't in your control. And the more you try to grasp life, the more it slips away. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the more it flows out. Have you noticed how much this costs you? This obsession with control is not only exhausting, but toxic. Turns you into a prisoner of unrealistic expectations, a permanent inspector of everything that could go wrong. And this has a name: anxiety. Anxiety at its core is the fear of the unpredictable. It's the desperation for guarantees in a world that offers none. Most people live in this constant state of alert, trying to predict every twist and turn as if that could prevent the accidents of the soul. But Montaigne knew something that modern psychology only confirmed centuries later. Living in an attempt to predict the future is living in a state of war with reality. You see, human suffering doesn't only come from what happens to us. Often, it arises from our futile struggle against what happens. It's the desire for life to be different from what it is. It's the rejection of the natural flow of things. Montaigne wrote about this with almost startling frankness. He accepted his pain, his losses, his uncertainties, not as something to eliminate, but as an integral part of existence. And by doing this, he freed himself from the burden of resisting everything. Have you noticed how the most controlling people are also the most tense, the most exhausted, the most inflexible? They can't relax because they believe that if they're not in control, something bad will happen. But this belief doesn't protect, it imprisons. Montaigne, on the contrary, proposed a conscious surrender, not a cowardly resignation, but a courageous acceptance that the world isn't your slave and that your mind needs to learn to flow, not to dominate. And here lies the cruel irony. The more you try to control, the more frustrated you become. And the more frustrated you are, the more you think you need control. It's a vicious cycle that consumes you entirely. And what do you gain in the end? A tense body, an exhausted mind, and a soul without peace. Montaigne shows us another way. Living well is not about controlling everything. It's about learning to coexist with what cannot be controlled. But how do you do that in practice? How do you learn to live with the unpredictable without losing yourself in it? The answer lies in Montaigne's attitude toward life, the constant practice of self-reflection, not as a cold analysis, but as a ritual of deep inner listening. While the world cried out for certainties, Montaigne withdrew into silence to observe what was within him. And what he found was not immediate clarity but a whirlwind. Contradictions, fears, confused desires, inexplicable impulses, everything most people prefer to hide or ignore. He chose to confront it head-on, but not as one who judges, as one who listens. Montaigne's brilliance wasn't in creating theories about the human mind. It was in having the courage to become a living experiment of the human condition. He transformed himself into a field of study, and his writing became a mirror. In his essays, he doesn't write as someone who teaches but as someone who shares a process. He thinks out loud and invites the reader to do the same. He didn't want to shape minds. He wanted to free them by narrating his doubts, his most intimate impulses, his changes of opinion, and even his moments of weakness. Montaigne reveals something revolutionary. You don't need to be right all the time. You just need to be present with yourself. This practice of constant self-observation, without filter or mask, is one of the deepest forms of self-knowledge. But be cautious. Observing yourself is not about torturing yourself with criticism. It's about learning to look inward with honesty and compassion. It's about realizing when you're deceiving yourself, pretending to know what you don't, or forcing yourself to maintain an image that no longer fits. Montaigne wrote to free himself from these shackles. He said, "I am human, and nothing human is alien to me." In other words, everything inside you, no matter how confusing or uncomfortable, is a legitimate part of who you are. And do you know what the most powerful aspect of this practice is? It dissolves shame.